Hello and welcome to another interesting edition of Islamic Finance Weekly, where we discuss key developments in the non-interest finance market. Poverty poses a major threat to a country's stability, and this can lead to hopelessness, inequality, creating a wide gap in the society. At a recent webinar, Dr. Abideen, Adewale, Head Research and Publications, Islamic Financial Services Board, gave a presentation on addressing poverty and inequality in Nigeria's economy, the role of Islamic finance. Starting with the concept of poverty and inequality, the experts acknowledged that it is a major challenge in Nigeria and has felt economic exclusion.
Poverty is perhaps the most serious threat to world peace, even more dangerous than terrorism, religious fundamentalism, ethnic hatred, political rivalries, or any other forces that are often cited as promoting violence and war. And if we pick, certain words from this broad definition, we would see that our nation is not immune from some of these vices at the moment. As somebody who is an expert and authority in the field of poverty alleviation, for him to have reached that conclusion, then this gathering today becomes very, very pertinent. Then again, poverty leads to hopelessness, which provokes people to desperate acts. In other words, those with practically nothing have no good reason to refrain from violence, since even acts with only a small chance of improving their conditions seem better than doing nothing and accepting their fate with passivity. Again, the opportunity cost of a poor person is zero. He's already on the ground anyway. He's not scared of falling down. So at the slightest opportunity, he doesn't care about the consequence. He is willing to do the bidding, or at the slightest provocation, he's also willing to demonstrate his latent violence. So as a result, a conclusion would be that poverty and inequality, therefore, are responsible for the poor's movement through the stages of apathy. In the first instance, they stay away, then voluntarily exclude themselves, and ultimately the result of violence.
He highlighted the dimensions of inequality that is adversely affecting the general economic structure of Nigeria.
Let's look at the broad concepts we have highlighted in this particular topic. The first one is inequality. And from a development finance point of view, it's looked at as the full spectrum or the distribution of well-being in its entire ramification. The moment that this is not going around, then the concept of inequality comes in as the first step before poverty itself manifests in its full force. So here, inequalities, therefore, fundamentally would be about relational disparities, denial of fair and equivalent enjoyment of rights that ordinarily, should be by default, and the persistence of arbitrary discrepancies. So in the first instance, the relational disparity sets in. Then later, it becomes, arbitrary. It means it's at the whim and caprices of those who have that opportunity of dispensing this well-being, as it were. So this, therefore, would be in the worth, status, dignity, freedoms of different people. Therefore, the question which we ask is, if we want to channel Islamic finance to solving this, then if inequality is very broad, we should ask, what type of inequality are we talking about then? Whose inequality are we talking about? What time is this inequality taking place? These are pertinent questions that would help us. The Lorenz curve that is being displayed here basically shows the Gini coefficient, which in development finance is used to measure the inequalities in a particular system. And what it's basically saying is that it reflects, the percentage of those who have certain share of the total income of the society, as it were. So we would assume that if we're on this dotted faint line, then everybody is equal. But the moment we start seeing this curve, as the curve gets deeper or steeper, then the inequality in the society becomes bigger. So what we'll be seeing here, for example, is that at point A, then the 50% of the entire population controls only 20% of the resource, as an example. Later on, I'll share with you the Gini coefficient of Nigeria. But what I want to show by the other slide, by the other chart on the right, is the fact that if you look at all these countries, these are developed countries, or the so-called advanced economies. And it will be gladdening to say that Nigeria is not here, because this is, where financial inequality is rampant. And it's not far-fetched. It may either be by happenstance or by design, but because in Nigeria, we are also communitarian in nature, so it is perhaps a likely reason why our financial inequality index is not as high. But this is to say that it's not all statistics that are bad in terms of Nigeria after all. We also have statistics where we don't feature prominently, even though they are undesirable statistics.
The IFSB official described poverty eradication as the #1 priority in the Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030.
Anyway, now if you look at other dimensions of inequality, we therefore see that there is political inequality, there is social inequality, there is gender inequality, there is educational inequality. So in some instances, we have people saying, no, it doesn't matter how much we participate in the political process, our votes do not count. And as a result, they've considered themselves to have political inequality. Social inequality in terms of neighborhood effect, where you grow up, the people you mix with, the kind of influence you can have, either as a result of parental influence or dynastic wealth, like I will show on later. Then we have this issue of gender inequality. It keeps coming up here and there. In fact, in the development realm, they talk about feminization of poverty. Of course, we also argue that feminization of poverty has not translated into masculinization of wealth. But again, the argument is there that females, or women generally, may be, having some form of inequality, and of course, educational inequality. So when you put all this together, it's very much typified in the pyramid you see on the right, which is the balance of payments. I saw the bottom of the pyramid chart. And what it's saying basically is that the poor, would very much be the ones that will be at the base, and they are usually in the majority. So if we are talking about poverty, therefore, we should therefore look at poverty from the point of view of the inequality. Inequality is a full measurement of well-being, dimensions of well-being. Poverty, therefore, is a very broad phenomenon. It's not just something we can define easily. In fact, the profile of definitions and conceptualizations of poverty only offer an illusion of clarity. And this makes it to remain sufficiently vague in terms of how, we actually define. In fact, to a very large extent, what researchers have done or what they have been able to produce is nothing more than a virtual cacophony of some sort, of protest and acclaims of what poverty is, what poverty is not. But again, this further exposes latent conflict in the conceptualization of poverty. But nonetheless, we look at it as a lower end of the distribution only. That is, those who fall below a particular threshold. So from an Islamic point of view, therefore, we could say, okay, the concept of fuqaraa or masakeen can also be applicable in this instance. Of course, there are various interpretations along the various school of thoughts also. But the point here is, in the context of our discussion, since we are linking it to finance, I want to assume we are looking at material poverty. We are looking at material well-being, even though issues of social inclusion, security, psychological comfort, freedom or choice and action, long-term planning horizons, and so on and so forth, are also things that are pertinent as far as poverty is concerned. So the bottom line is, poverty itself is like an orchestral dance with so many styles and rhythm, all to the entertainment of a helpless audience, which is the poor. So if we want to capture it properly, and this is what has been going on, even when microcredit started earlier, towards the end of last century, it graduated to microfinance, it graduated to livelihood finance, and so on and so forth. What we have realized is that poverty had all the while be conceived as a static phenomenon, whereas it's a transient phenomenon. It moves from one generation to another. So in that case, there is a trap. When we are designing Islamic finance to play a role, therefore, the conceptualization of poverty, therefore, should be in the light of the maqasid that looks at one of its essential as the preservation of progeny. So it's not a static phenomenon. It's something that, goes across from generation. So in this case, we look at ITP, which is the intergenerational transmission of poverty, that looks at poverty from the point of view of the fact that those who are rich would be able to transmit properties to their children, while those who are poor would also transfer poverty to their children. Therefore, it persists across generations. It becomes what we call dynastic poverty. May Allah save us from that. So for this later group, which are the children, if you look at this chart I have here, now, when the child is given birth to, alhamdulillah, welcome and things like that, but the parent's condition determines the kind of opportunity the child will have in life. Let's say, for instance, is disadvantaged in terms of education and skills. That determines the kind of job or the kind of livelihood he would also have later in life. And therefore is entrapped into the poverty cycle, then he becomes a parent again and it continues, and so on and so forth. So poverty therefore should not be looked at as a static phenomenon, rather it's a transient phenomenon.
He also highlighted the fact that the Islamic Development Bank has come up with an economic empowerment paradigm to address these obstacles.
The United Nations, also the World Bank, there is this sustainable development goals. And you see that the number one there is poverty, no poverty. But then you see, we also have at number 10, reduced inequalities. So it means the topic we have chosen for today very much aligns with the global thinking in terms of seeing these menaces as needed to be taken care of as much as possible. The IDB also, coming closer home now, also has, come up with, an economic empowerment paradigm that views that poverty in Muslim nations or member countries, are derived essentially from these 6 obstacles: lack of access to well-designed and profitable project opportunities, low social capital for the poor to build intelligent partnerships that support his or activity, lack of sufficient affordable infrastructure, and of course, I've put this in red color because lack of access to appropriate funding, frustrates entrepreneurial activity and also frustrates the acquisition of sustainable livelihood assets. Of course, there is a lack of capacity and weak belief in self-potential. And the last one is lack of access to relevant market.
Speaking further, he said, Islamic finance can address poverty in Nigeria, improving the role of citizens in the economic circles in their countries.
There is so much we can expect the industry to do by itself. It means, therefore, we have to stop looking into the mirror and start looking outside of the window. So in that case, we have to see what other alternate platforms can complement Islamic finance from the former point of view to ensure poverty alleviation. So in that case, we look at the fact that Islamic finance itself has enormous potentials. The first one is that its inherent risk-sharing mechanism is very, very excellent, and it suits the purpose. And Dr. Ali will remember while he was still at IUM, I think there was this integrated model that the Islamic Economic Unit was trying to look at, whereby, based on your capacity, if for those who need qard, they get qard. Those who need mudaraba, they get mudaraba. Those who need musharaka, they get musharaka. So that everybody is taken along. And I think this has worked very well. If you look at Akhwat in Pakistan, it's a very, very successful model. If you look at Wasil Foundation in Pakistan, very successful model. And of course, numerous models here in Malaysia as well as in Indonesia. Then it is linked to the real economy. So whatever it's finance or so, it's not just for the fun of it. It's not gambling. It's not things that do not bring value to the real economy. So it enhances human capital, social capital, physical capital, natural capital, and of course, psychological capital. Then there is generally low level of financial citizenship in Nigeria. If the penetration rate is low for takaful, if there is enormous investment opportunities in the sukuk space, and the Islamic banking is still less than 1% in Nigeria, it means, therefore, there is enormous room for this industry to grow. And as it grows, it's linked to the real economy, and its inherent risk-sharing mechanism can only help alleviate poverty.
Dr. Abideen Adewale provided insight on the proposed Islamic finance-based poverty alleviation model.
This is an aspect where financing can take place because these are the active, economic active population of Nigeria. There's so much they can do, and the Islamic finance should start looking into this direction. Huge potentials in terms of Islamic fintech. Of course, from blockchain to cryptocurrency, trading and investment, crowdfunding, remittances, forex, peer-to-peer finance, insurtech, digital banking, data analytics, personal finance and banking software, etc. And I think, again, maybe in this space, some other speakers will be highlighting more. But I'm just trying to say that these have worked in numerous jurisdictions, and it can also work. And even if you look at our insecurity issues in Nigeria, there are a lot of refugees, internally displaced persons. There are mechanisms that have been used through Islamic finance, leveraging on technology to ensure that these things are solved. Social family card in Egypt, vulnerable card, Indonesia, and so on and so forth, in Kenya. But I just wish to highlight that the Islamic social finance sector is worth about $300 billion a year. And Nigeria is one of the enormous contributors to this. So what, again, we need to do, maybe in terms of our collection, in terms of our administration, in terms of our disbursement, this can actually help to solve a lot of our problems. In fact, in Indonesia, they had used, zakat fund to, come up, execute a micro hydropower project that cost about $350,000 US. It's all from zakat. Then there is huge infrastructure deficit. I think this we cannot deny the contribution of Sukuk, but there is so much potential that can be done. Examples are Alia Airport in Jordan, and of course, even in Djibouti, their shipping port was financed through this. So enormous potential in that instance also. The more these infrastructures are there, it aligns with the intent of the government of the day, that the more infrastructures we have, then the more also will be opportunities in terms of direct job and indirect job, and people can do well.
It is clear that collaboration between key stakeholders in the Islamic finance ecosystem and the government will provide innovative products and services that can lift millions of Nigerians from poverty. And that will be all for this edition of Islamic Finance Weekly. You can log on to our website, www.quotientenergy.com, to read our latest stories and watch our videos on Islamic finance. You can also follow us on our social media platform displaying on the screen. Till we come your way again next week Friday. Please stay safe and have a nice day.